When I was offered the opportunity to look at new neighbors, I was confused by the offer. Now I understand why it was necessary, and I'm ready to share my story. My name is Jeremy. My wife Lori was everything to me. Her love seemed boundless, and no one else was ever able to take her place in my heart. Despite the pain we caused each other, there was always more joy. Our meeting happened at her best friend's wedding, where we were destined to meet by fate. Later, while socializing at a charity event, I made sure to get her contact information. Our texting nights and dinners together gradually grew into a strong relationship. After 2 years of dating, I proposed, to which she said yes. We married right out of college and started a new life in Washington, D.C., where we both aspired to be. I was in sales and often worked overtime. Lori, as an entrepreneur, also had a busy schedule. Despite this, we were always supportive of each other and tried to save time to date together, deciding to put the issue of children on hold until we could give them enough attention. Recently, however, my job had become more demanding, causing me guilt and fatigue, which was affecting my career/life balance. Lori began acting strangely, staying out late, which was unusual for her normal routine. Concerned, I initially decided not to jump to conclusions and assumed she was innocent. However, after 2 weeks, her strange behavior intensified, and I could no longer ignore the obvious. I decided to talk to her about what was going on and discovered that she was cheating on me with our new neighbor, Martin, who had recently moved into our neighborhood. This betrayal came as a blow to me as the man I loved and valued threw away our 5-year history for a fleeting moment of pleasure. It became a situation that I still find hard to believe. Despite my initial reaction of acting like nothing had happened, I could not allow the deception to continue. I made the decision to reveal the truth to Lori so she would realize how aware I was of the situation. It was painful to see her struggling to comprehend my words. My heart clenched at the thought of her constant tardiness at home. Every time I brought it up, she waved it off, assuring me that I was worrying in vain. My initial trust in her was boundless. I was perhaps too naive or too loyal, but I truly loved and adored her. My trust in her was so great that I couldn't imagine that she could cheat on me. It became uncomfortable to realize how much I trusted her, especially since our neighbor turned out to be her lover who lived just a few steps away from our house. My calm demeanor probably convinced her that she could avoid the consequences. However, 2 weeks ago, I realized that the truth needed to be revealed. After consulting with friends, I decided to hire a private investigator, although at first I hesitated to follow my wife. Eventually, I realized the need to expose the truth behind my back. I knew that a direct confrontation with Lori would not lead to the desired result, as cheaters rarely admit their wrongdoing. Given the nature of my work and the need for secrecy, I hired a detective to discreetly observe Lori's actions. He became my covert observer, and I was able to keep my intentions a secret from Lori. She was initially puzzled by the sudden need for an usher, but I convinced her that it was due to my difficulty in opening the gate after work. The private investigator performed his role flawlessly, giving the impression of a regular gatekeeper's job. Due to my busy schedule, I had little time to be home for updates. Over the weekend, the private investigator shared some information with me. He noted that my wife had acted with caution, which made it difficult to gather conclusive evidence. However, a few days later, he provided me with significant evidence. Lori's night outings turned out to be no simple outings. She was dressing up to meet our new neighbor, Martin. Upon learning this, I was amazed at her ability to fool me with a man who had moved into our neighborhood only 4 months earlier. The evidence, including photos and videos, though taken in the dark, confirmed the cheating. The faces in them were indistinguishable, but I'm sure it was my wife and neighbor. It wasn't an easy decision, but I couldn't keep quiet about Lori's betrayal. It strengthened my resolve, and after careful thought, I devised a plan. I wanted her to realize that I was fully aware of her actions. I looked forward to seeing her fear and the difficulty she would face in trying to make sense of the situation. My initial solution was to subtly hint that I knew about her cheating, intending to put her in a difficult position. I had a detailed plan to expose it, and I was waiting for the moment when she would fall right into the trap I had set. The most dangerous people often appear soft but are forced into ruthlessness by abuse. It had been 2 weeks of actively watching Lori, and frankly, living in the same house with the woman I once called my wife had become extremely difficult. She shamelessly continued her affair, and my private investigator continued to send me disturbing news. A few days ago, I walked into the living room where Lori was sitting, compromising photos in my hands. Anger built up within me as I began to recount the new evidence. Before I could express my frustration, Lori boldly asked me for money. Yes, she demanded money despite her actions. In response, I threw the pictures in her direction. Her eyes widened in surprise, and that look on her face both made me angry and showed me that the pictures were indeed real. I couldn't hold back any longer. It was unbearable. We got into a heated argument. Lori showed no remorse for her actions. Instead, she tried to blame me, portraying herself as the victim and trying to provoke me into physical violence. I wisely kept my hands behind my back and refused to give in. I made it clear that our relationship was over, and her attempts to manipulate me only strengthened my resolve. It was painful to realize that she was trying to provoke me into wrongdoing so that she could then hold me accountable. It may have just been a defensive reaction, but I am convinced it was a manipulative action. After leaving the house that day, I returned the next day and found Lori asking for money for groceries. She apparently thought I had forgotten everything that had happened, but I ignored her and started throwing all of her things out of the closet. When she returned, she witnessed the aftermath of the burned clothes. In a fit of rage, she threatened to report me to the police if I did not refund the value of her clothes. Ignoring her, I realized the extent of her desperation and lack of respect when she resorted to physical aggression and I had to push her away. Stunned by the revelations of a woman with whom I had shared a life for years, I finally told her that I had burned all her belongings. This brought her to tears and threats, but only reinforced my decision to end this toxic relationship. She was completely dumbfounded and started screaming. I remained calm, determined to carry out my plan. I grabbed her hands tightly and led her outside the gates of our house right into the center of the neighborhood. This place was known for its love of gossip, and I knew the people there wouldn't miss a chance to learn the details of a new drama. I had deliberately chosen this place, anticipating that it would attract attention. Lori's screams echoed loudly, drawing a curious crowd. I couldn't tell if her reaction was too dramatic or if my grip was really too strong. I couldn't deny that I might have left bruises on her arms during the pullout. As Lori's screams intensified, the crowd began to suspect that I was bullying her. I paid no attention to their assumptions. All I cared about was executing my plan. Among the audience was Martin, Lori's lover. I had anticipated his participation and had arranged this scene on purpose. Without explaining anything, I announced to the neighbors that Lori was no longer my wife and would no longer live with me. Before I could finish my words, Lori, standing nearby, was visibly shaken. She hated public humiliation, and I knew it would hurt her pride. I knew her weak spot in front of everyone. I told them that Martin and my wife were having an affair and that they should live together from now on. I walked Lori over to Martin and handed her to him. He was clearly shocked and scared. When he turned to me, I couldn't contain my anger and slapped him. This sent him into a rage. What bothered me most was that he was a new neighbor, barely the age of my younger brothers. The neighbors tried to intervene when I started being aggressive with Martin. I ended up injuring him and he started limping. This was a consequence of his betrayal. Eventually, the neighbors were able to intervene and restrain me. I went back into the house and began destroying wedding photos that reminded me of the pain. After a couple hours, I decided to take a break and rest. However, I soon heard a noise outside the gate. The private investigator informed me that Lori and her parents were standing at the door begging me to come out to them. I was shocked by their insistence and refused to go to them. This incident made me realize how condescending and naive I had been in the past. I went out that day, indifferent to the neighbors' excitement about my previous actions. My sole purpose was to print out pictures of Lori and Martin to hang all over the neighborhood and in front of my gate. After printing them out, I returned home with the intention of hiring someone to hang them at night. The next morning, I heard a knock on the gate. Stepping outside, I found a neighbor and a crying Lori. They showed me a printed photograph that indicated the private investigator had done his job. Lori fell to her knees, begging me to stop trying to ruin her life. Some neighbors even joined her, urging me to reconsider my decision to keep the compromising photos. People asked if I felt embarrassed. It puzzled me why I should feel embarrassed when I had been betrayed. I explained that the photos were provocative and captured her in compromising situations. I denied that I was the one who released them after the gate closed. Afterward, I had a hearty breakfast and got ready for the workday. The plan for the day was to meet with my attorney, who had already started preparing the divorce papers. I was determined to end my relationship with Lori as soon as possible. I needed an attorney to help me minimize my alimony costs. I turned off my cell phone to avoid the incessant calls from Lori and her parents. I didn't answer the phone, determined to no longer give in to their manipulation as I had in the past. Reflecting on how I had allowed her family to control our wedding, I realized how naive I had been. Lori's betrayal made me deeply ashamed of how I had allowed myself to be used. Our lives seemed normal. We shared personal information, such as knowing each other's bank PIN numbers, because of the closeness of our relationship. Taking the opportunity when Lori, being an entrepreneur, had savings and client accounts, I packed up her belongings. After stumbling across one of her bank cards, instead of destroying it, I withdrew all the money she had saved, including her client's money, the same day I sent her packing her belongings. I destroyed her cell phone so she wouldn't know the funds were missing. She used her parents' phone to try to contact me. The realization of the missing money hit her too late. I had planned to use some of the money to support my divorce case, anticipating a difficult legal battle. It was just the beginning, and Lori had no idea of the storm that was coming. Perhaps it was time for me to take the other side, to unleash the beast that had been hiding under my calm demeanor for too long in the midst of the chaos of divorce. The need to get revenge for all the constant disrespect I had endured from her was on my mind. By the time I finished my plan, she would regret using me. These past weeks have been a whirlwind, and I'm still figuring out the details. I promise to share further developments with you soon, but it's time to focus on work again. Money doesn't make itself, and I need to provide a steady income. During my breaks, it dawned on me that I needed to confront Martin, not only for Lori's sake, but for my own peace of mind. Surprisingly, he lived not far from our house. Although I knew about the new neighbor, I never assumed he was related to my wife. The age difference, he was at least 5 years younger than me, fueled my anger. It made me think about what women really want. Lori's betrayal with a younger man intensified my resentment. Why sacrifice our marriage for a fleeting moment of pleasure? It made me question why it's so hard for some to outright ask for a divorce when they're tired of their partner. Had she expressed a desire to end our marriage, I would not have hesitated to honor her decision. Instead, she chose to cheat, an act I consider cowardly and shameful. After learning that Martin worked for a technology company, I decided to visit him. The proximity of our homes and the fact that he was a young professional strengthened my resolve. When I got to his workplace, I insisted on meeting him. It took some time before I was granted an audience. When I finally confronted Martin, he looked stunned, as if he expected retribution for his actions. It saddened me that Lori had decided to cheat on me with someone who seemed so scared. However, I couldn't ignore the fact that I was nothing but a wimp to her. Perhaps she was looking for the type of man she could control despite my imposing appearance. That didn't stop her from betraying me. I expressed my resentment over cheating with someone who looked like a scaredy cat. The details of my confrontation with Martin had been intense. Now I was determined to make sure Lori faced the consequences of her actions. Martin's display of fear was amusing. His cast in bandages hinted at the aftermath of our last encounter. It seemed the beating I'd given him had really left an impression. I couldn't keep from laughing. He even limped visibly before I could utter a word. Martin started apologizing immediately. He said, "I'm sorry for everything that happened. I messed it all up. I didn't know she was your wife. She told me you were both cousins and that she was staying with you temporarily until she got back on her feet." He was desperately trying to justify himself. Initially, I didn't want to believe him, but he provided proof. Voice recordings of Lori calling me her cousin. It seemed that Lori had tricked him, and he had fallen for the trick. I couldn't help but think that he was just as naive as she was. If he was really interested in the truth, he would have recognized it despite his curiosity. But she had blinded him. Obvious ignorance can never be an excuse, but I was determined not to hurt Martin any further. I'd punished him enough already, and I wasn't going to waste time with Lori's sloppy behavior. I refused to give her the satisfaction of thinking she had hurt me badly, even though she really had. I didn't want her to know that. I asked if Lori was staying with Martin, and to my relief, he said he had kicked her out and ended their relationship. That was exactly what I wanted to accomplish by confronting him. Martin took matters into his own hands and broke up with Lori without my interference. I didn't have to make any effort. All my wishes were granted. Martin continued to apologize, but I no longer had any beef with him. I was pleased to know that he and Lori were no longer together. To confirm the truth, I asked my private investigator to verify Martin's claims. Within 2 days, he confirmed that Lori had indeed moved out, and they had broken up 2 weeks before my discovery. My satisfaction grew, but Lori wasn't done with her antics. 2 weeks after the confrontation, she ambushed me at my workplace. She fell to her knees and burst into tears. She even threatened to strip naked if I didn't forgive her. My coworkers were stunned and the drama unfolded before their eyes. I remained undeterred despite her emotional manipulation and told her she could do whatever she saw fit. When I returned home that afternoon, I learned from my attorney that the divorce papers were ready. I signed them and mailed them to Lori's house. Even though 2 weeks had passed, she didn't sign them. Instead, she came to my house and demanded to talk to me. She claimed that all her money was missing after going to the bank and accused me of missing it. I denied involvement and asked that she be removed from my home. Lori insisted that she wouldn't sign the divorce papers until I returned the money. Reluctantly, I agreed, as I had no plans for a new marriage anytime soon. I was prepared for legal drama if that's what she wanted. I had fully satisfied my thirst for revenge and had no problem with her dragging out the divorce process, including possible legal problems and financial difficulties. I even found a girlfriend for some carefree fun. It wasn't easy, but I felt elated. That's the end of this story. Unfortunately, the man this happened to didn't share what happened next with him and his wife, but that doesn't stop us from drawing conclusions. We believe that violence is not justified. Cheating is a stupid act done by people who are lost in themselves, but that doesn't give you the right to hurt anyone. The main character should not have turned violent towards the man and his ex-wife. The fact that he emptied all of her accounts and let the whole neighborhood know about her could be considered punishment, but perhaps it was unnecessary. This story shows once again that you have to be honest first and foremost and always address all issues at once so it doesn't turn into something massive and horrible.